Today's episode of Folklore Origins is recorded in front of a live domesticated feline audience who are sleeping at the moment. Both of them. Bitches. Anyway, this is the Jester here with my co-hosts and producers and other people of that nature, Grim Art and Dragon Fox.
Hey, how's it going? This is Grim Art.
What's up from Dragon Fox?
All right, good deal. So, as from our previous episode, would say our pilot episode, right? Yes. You could tell that we're not really into telling stories on here. We're just more interested in talking about the real world application of myths and legends. Do some of them exist, or are some of them just based off of stories passed down from the ages? You know, I mean, who's to say that one day we don't have Legend of Katniss in the Games of Hunger? It's just one of the possibilities. So, continue on with more things that might possibly be real. Today, we are going to be talking about the legendary Kraken. What are you guys' thoughts on the subject for today?
We definitely do not know enough about our oceans to at least not touch on this, because who knows?
I do like how you brought up the legend of Katniss and the hunger, or the Games of Hunger, because realistically, for all we know, that could have been the olden days Gilgamesh.
Right.
But as far as the Kraken goes, I think that since we only know 10% of our ocean comparison to the 90% that we know about our moon, that means that there's a lot more to explore in our oceans than we think there are, and it gives us plenty of reason to assume that there are probably things in there that we're just not aware of.
Oh, I totally agree. I'm always afraid to go into the ocean. There's so many things that could possibly kill me.
Everything in there is designed to kill you.
Right. And it's genuinely much bigger than you. And if it's not bigger than you, then it's poisonous. So, yeah, there's just nothing good in the ocean. And I have to say the Kraken and the Megalodon are some of the worst as some of the biggest creatures. Because, we've got stories from back in the day of sailors saying that they've seen Krakens as big as islands. You know, they cause, they simulate volcanic activity under the ocean. Bubbling, dark fumes, dead fish just rising to the top of the ocean. We've got a little bit about their appearance and origins off of Wiki here. Good old Wiki. It reads, since the late 18th century, Kraken have been depicted in a number of ways, primarily as a large octopus-like creature, and it has often been alleged that, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to read that. Pontopodians? Can you read that, Dragon?
No idea.
What is the word? Let me see this. Pontopidans?
Pontoppidan's Kraken might have been based on sailors' observations of the giant squid. The Kraken is also depicted to have spikes on its sucker, and in the earliest description, however, the creature was more crab-like than octopus-like. Generally proposed traits that were associated with large whales rather than giant squid.
I love arcelated things.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that little bit of banter. Associated. Anyway.
There have also been tales of it being more serpent-like.
And most of these are just the Norwegian and northern depictions of a sea creature or sea monster. You know, the eastern areas in the Asian cultures have depicted sea creatures as long as they've seen the ocean. Even cave paintings from, cavemen, have pictures of mysterious creatures from the ocean or half fish, half people kind of creatures that existed at one point in time.
Not to mention all the artifacts and sculptures from the Viking era, and we all know they were big sailors.
Oh, the biggest amongst the sailors in almost all throughout history. But I still kind of believe, in my opinion, that the fear from the Kraken originally stemmed from our fear of a giant cuttlefish, because from everything that we found from the research of the Kraken, from my experience and the number of researches that I do, is that, well, the Kraken is something that we definitely can't rule out as an existing species.
Mm-hmm.
That looking back upon history, as we have feared creatures based on our fears themselves and made creatures to represent them, that there may be a chance that we saw the face of the cuttlefish, it being freaky as hell, and decided that things bigger than that look very similar could possibly exist in the ocean.
And we're finding new species down in the ocean every year. Species that scientists were pretty much positive had gone extinct, millions of years ago. We've got them swimming in aquariums, here out in Minnesota, land of 10,000 frozen lakes.
Even recently, I've seen videos of what appears to be megalodons attacking large ships and other giant sharks.
Yep, I've also heard about that. There are numerous scientists and oceanologists all over the world that claim and completely believe themselves that there is a creature like the Kraken that could exist out in the oceans. And it's hard to say how old it is, and it's hard to say how new it is.
And who's to say that maybe the cuttlefish, as weird of a fishy snail-topus as it looks, who's to say that there isn't a bigger version of it living down deeper than we've been able to explore?
Right, exactly. And, there could even still be other creatures, dinosaurs. There's been hypothetical dinosaurs still living in our oceans. I mean, sharks have been unchanged for millions of years. Who's to say that we don't still have some of the other creatures back from those days swimming around in our oceans, too?
Especially since there's bacteria that has been able to take on physical form and be capable of eating full-sized fish.
Scientists have even been stumped as they just actually found a horn from what they believe to be a triceratops dating only 300,000 years ago, which is a lot less than 64 million.
Very much less. I didn't even know that. That's very confusing. Wow. I mean,
it shows that we don't know enough, and that also dinosaurs could have been around when there were cavemen.
No, it's true. I mean, we've found new evidence. I've heard that we found new evidence that dates humanity back farther than we thought, back to the time of actually when dinosaurs pretty much did still roam. And when I heard that, I kind of just laughed to myself. I'm like, it changes every 10 years, every decade. We hear, oh, well, yeah, I found more evidence that we've actually found things that we thought didn't exist. Guess what? They do now. Wow.
Yeah, they found a human remains, a human fossil that was 350 million years old. And dinosaurs supposedly went extinct 64 million years ago. So there's a good chance that we actually did get to experience a lot of what was on the surface, and we just haven't been able to find the proper fossils to identify the time frame in which those events occurred.
Well, and then on a recent episode of, not a recent episode, but an old episode of I think it was a Nova show again.
Nova's fantastic.
Where it was talking about the great human migration, essentially. And at one point in time, scientists theorized that because the Earth wasn't completely frozen over during the Ice Age, you still had the equator. At the point of the equator, there was ice, but it was more like Minnesota in winter, is what they say. And with the shifting lands and ice movements, they theorized that there was a path for people or creatures to walk around in. And heck, I mean, I've even seen on Google, I probably was a fake story, but I've even seen on Google that they're trying to genetically clone a mammoth from DNA that they found inside of a iceberg.
Actually, no, that is very true. They have been working on that since like 2009, 2010. Just their previous attempts to be able to genetically clone the mammoth have been unsuccessful up to this point, only because they haven't taken into consideration specific types of variables.
Right.
To bring it back to the Kraken and its very possible existence, is the fact that there are many amphibians and other sea creatures that when ice does freeze over lakes, rivers, they can live through being frozen. They either dig a hole in the mud or they go into hibernation while frozen, and then as soon as the melt comes, they end up coming back to life. So it's obvious that in the ocean is a very good place to not only hide, but to survive.
Yes, especially if you don't really need oxygen to survive, or don't really, because there are points underneath the ocean and such where there are oxygen pockets. Again, I was just talking about over by the equator where the ice would have been thinner.
Sea lions finding caves and icebergs.
And we also have vats of sulfuric acid that is being poured out of volcano vents at the bottom of the ocean floor, where we have worms that have learned to survive on this kind of environment, where when they experience oxygen, it actually physically kills them. But at the same time, we have the creatures called the water bears that can exist in a vacuum of space for up to 15 years without any oxygen, food, or water and still survive.
So I think it's still, and we've seen bigger creatures that survive on smaller things than itself. For instance, whales, the plankton and all of that they eat. What was that? You can speak louder than that.
Camels also are a great source of, if you're looking for creatures that require very little for how long they can sustain energy for.
I was thinking creatures in the sea, but that also works.
Hey, this desert is a sea of sand, man.
That's
Well,
a
and
good point.
technically, water is only a thicker level of existence than gas is. So technically, you could say that our atmosphere is a sea of gases in which we are just the bottom feeders of the ocean.
You're a thicker level of existence. So obviously there's a bit of non-debate amongst us on this, and it seems like most of the rest of the world kind of agrees too. The only thing that we don't really want to agree on or tend to fear is a lot of people don't really want to agree on the mermaid theory, which
Although it would be really cool if they did exist, I'm not going to lie about that.
Depending on which version.
yes, depending on which version. Because you have the ones that are man-eating monsters, and the ones that are soul-sucking songstresses, or the ones that are just beautiful women of the sea.
And then there's the succubuses.
Well, that's a demon, so...
Yeah, but they
And
just...
on land.
Yeah.
No, they've been known to be mermaids too.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
the
It's
soul-sucking
sirens.
bitches.
That's
Well,
I
yeah.
said the soul-sucking.
They didn't say how they suck the souls. Some of them suck different ways.
Ugh. You suck in different ways.
That's what she said.
This is a great way to end an episode.
It's not done yet.
Oh
This
no,
is not
I know.
even done yet.
It's just thinking of it,
So, what else do we have here that we can talk about? We could talk about the Loch Ness Monster since we're on sea creatures.
This is true. We could.
So why don't we?
Once again, I'd just have to bring it back to, Loch Ness being a lake dweller.
A lake-dwelling Leopleurodon, highly unlikely.
But like I said before, look at the alligator or crocodile. Freshwater alligators and crocodiles. They're technically considered dinosaurs that have survived for all these millions of years.
Same with sharks. We did
And
mention
sharks,
that.
yep. So what's to say that some other bigger dinosaur-like creature hasn't existed or doesn't still exist and just happens to, be in a big enough lake with enough caves.
Grim, you did bring up the fact about hibernation and the ice and everything. I know that technically this thing is older than dirt. Technically this thing would be like billions of years old, essentially, by now.
Not only would it be billions of years old, but it would be size of a school bus and a half, which the perfect hiding for a creature the size of a school bus and a half, when we've caught creatures, that have been much smaller, and they're a lot less confined. Because this Leopleurodon, and I'm only playing for the negative aspect here, just to be able to give these guys something to argue against here.
I like it.
But the Loch Ness Monster being a Leopleurodon, if you look into its scientific specs from what we know from the dinosaur database, it is like the size of a school bus and a half.
Right.
And if we're confining it to one lake and it's being allowed the chances to offspring, that makes it a little different than alligators and crocodiles, because you think they'd be a lot more noticed.
True, but it all depends. No, you're right. It does matter. It really does, because we don't know how the organs work of such creatures. We don't know until we catch it, and a lot of the scientists don't want to catch it because they don't want to kill it. And that's how you find all of the gooey insides.
Not to mention, places like Madagascar, the only known place to have lemurs. Or, I forget the other name of the island, but Komodo dragons only live on one certain island.
I think it's actually Bikini Island.
I thought it was the Galapagos.
Oh, the Galapagos, yes, no. I don't know why. Yes. Yes.
The Galapagos has special types of birds, lizards, spiders, everything. That's just specifically indigenous to that one area.
So who's to say there's not a place like a lake, which Loch Ness Lake, if you've ever seen on a map, it's, a mini ocean on its own.
It really is.
Who's to say that lake doesn't have, a specific creature that's only lives in said lake?
Ecological overcrowding.
But here's the thing, is even the townspeople don't really have any idea how their fish supply doesn't overpopulate itself. There's something in there that's preying on the fish, and from what they've caught no predator fishes. So what is eating the... I know that
at least not enough to thin out the herd.
Right, at least not enough to thin out the herd. I know that there are fish that will eat other fish, of course, to get bigger, because the more intake fish get, the more food they get, the bigger they get, which is what we were kind of discussing with the Plesiodon.
That, and it also depends on the space that they're allowed to grow in.
Well, again, they have a big space, like Fox just said. It's an ocean in and of itself, so they have a large space to grow in, but yet they haven't found any large species of fish or any other creature.
Not to mention the Great Lakes. I mean, we don't even know everything about them, and they're probably only half the size of Loch Ness Lake.
Hell, I've even heard that there's been theories of sharks in our Great Lakes that we hadn't known about.
Well, there's 2 video footages that you can actually look up on YouTube itself, where they have found great white sharks swimming up the Mississippi River.
Oh yeah, that's fun. Remind me never to go swimming again. I love the water, but I hate sharks.
Well, that, and you should always fear the bacteria that crawls up your urethra and clings itself to the inside of your bladder and ruins your insides. That's the Mississippi River.
Okay, yeah, I don't ever plan on going down the Mississippi River.
Thank God for pools with chlorine.
This is what we have to deal with while living in Minnesota. Like the days where you have to decide, am I going to get frostbite or sunburn today?
Which is a real thing.
Unfortunately, yeah. And actually, there's a documented case. I'm not kidding about that. There is literally a documented case of somebody getting frostbite and sunburn on the same day.
And if you don't get sunburned, you get windburned.
Yeah. Is there... I think we've covered pretty much everything.
Possibilities-wise, yes.
We've given you plenty to think about for now.
At least I hope so.
I hope so, too.
Again... This was recorded live in front of a domesticated feline audience. Still sleeping.
Still sleeping.
And we've hoped that you've enjoyed this next installment of Folklore Online. Folklore Origins. Oh, gonna have to edit that.
Be looking forward to any comments.
And again, this is just some of the stuff that we are coming up with ourselves. Like I said, we don't normally do stories, but if you have a story that you would like to submit to us, that you'd like us to read, and a little bit of the background behind it, with some credible background behind it would also help, please send that to
Hungry Toast Entertainment at gmail.com. It's literally just one word, Hungry Toast Entertainment, no spaces. If you had to take a pause to breathe, you're doing too long.
I am the Jester here for Grim Art and Dragon Fox. This again has been Folklore Origins.